Hi, part two of my discussion is the United States in a civil war. Obviously, I believe we are. What I was saying, I left off last time saying, except that these things are going to happen to you. I think the best expression of that was at the Tea Party, the 9/12/2009 Tea Party last year. This kid held up a sign and says, "Look, anything I say, you're going to call me a racist." That's basically how conservatives have to look at the language coming from the left and the language coming from your own government. But you have to acknowledge that also that they're trying to delegitimize the conservative movement, and they're trying to make government inaccessible to conservative ideology. And again, this week, all of these things came into focus. Look at what happened to Ann Coulter in Canada. You can't tell me that the left isn't fundamentally authoritarian in the way I just described it, that they want to deny conservatives access to public space. Public space. And you've heard, I mean, if you really listen to some of the language that's coming from the left, you really see that they believe that they represent the public, and conservatives represent, I guess, big business. And they do not believe that we have the same moral claim to public space that they do. And the whole thing was played out in Canada, and Mark Steyn writes about this all the time. And see, about healthcare, look at the divergence between the left and I guess most of the rest of America on the issue of whether it's the healthcare reform bill was constitutional or not. Look, if you understand constitutional history, and I'm not claiming I'm an expert, and you look at some of the provisions in that bill, especially those individual mandates, you understand that no government, some people even said not even the Soviet government, has claimed the powers that are contained in that bill for itself over the people. And some commentators have even said, look, this is a departure from how we understand ourselves as Americans. I mean, if we believe in ourselves as a free people, as a people devoted to liberty. And what was liberty to us? Liberty has always been defined in the American, political culture as, limited government, as restraint of power in government. This expands government power, and that's one thing I just do not, and I will never understand about the left, is they claim that they are so much for the people, but they have absolutely no problem expanding government power, even to the crazy point that this healthcare bill expands government power and does not do so based on the Constitution. And look at, that's why we're in a civil war, because if I'm going to say that, and I'm going to tell you, look, requiring somebody to buy a product eventually gives the government the power to tell you to do almost anything. The left will say, well, that's not true, even though it is theoretically. But they only say it's not true confidently believing that they are the ones who will determine in the future what people will buy and what people won't buy. And see, that's their fundamental arrogance. That's what they believe. So, I mean, I can't. How can you ever deal with people who have that kind of political philosophy? If you so I mean, that's why we're in a civil war. Fundamentally. And you can prove it, that the left does not want conservatives, or they do not believe conservatives should have any moral, legitimate access to public space, and that includes the government. And obviously now it looks like it includes access to speak their minds on a university campus, and that's been going on for a long time, and we understand that. And people have been fighting that for years, but I show videos where, you know, the ambassador from Israel was basically shouted off the stage. And to me, when you do that, when you essentially subvert rights that are guaranteed to people, when you subvert rights that are guaranteed to people by a constitution, and you have absolutely no problem with that, A, that shows that you don't respect the Constitution, and B, it shows that you want to eliminate me from the public square. And that's why, again, I say we're in a civil war. And it's so obvious. Look, this is a Marxist tactic, okay? And this is what I'm going to leave you with. When Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, he came to power, essentially, he was the president, okay? But there was a coup against him in 2002, and if you have to study the anatomy of that coup, and I have a video about it on VodPod, but it's very similar. There were a million people came out in the streets to protest against him, and the protest was basically became violent, but nobody knows who fired the first shots. And then there was a famous incident where people were firing into the crowd off of this bridge, right? And what happened was, immediately after that was known, the left and Chavez came out in order to support their own political program, and they said, oh man, you see these right-wing Nazi, racist, homophobes, blah 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 blah, they were shooting at people in the crowd. And later a film was done, actually, that analyzed the video footage that someone had collected about that incident, and they identified that the people actually doing the shooting were people who were part of Chavez's government. So they were doing it in support of Chavez. So believe me, this whole idea of whipping up all this opposition and forcing people to analyze all these little incidents, they're doing it with impunity right now. And it is, believe me, it's a Marxist tactic. I don't know if they really want, I don't know if there's some kind of plan to, you know, I don't know if there's a plan in place, but just all the lies and the accusations in the last year and the last 2 years, it really does resemble like what Chavez did at the beginning of his regime in Venezuela. You know, there's a lot of similarities, so you have to wonder about the nature of what's going on, and that's all I'm saying. Just accept that the left wants to delegitimize everybody except itself from being in power, and that's what's happening in the United States today. And I'll leave you with that. Thanks a lot. Bye.